Hey folks, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I want to show you 3 tips for mixing triple tracked acoustic guitars. So we've got 3 acoustic guitars here and we're mixing them all together, but I'm going to show you a couple tips, a couple tips to get them sitting correctly here inside the track. Before we dive in though, if you're ready to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process step by step to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and look at these guitars. So this is kind of the middle re-intro section on this track, and it spotlights these triple tracked acoustic guitars. So it's 2 normal acoustic guitars, and then we've got a 12-string tucked underneath here. So you can kind of hear how they're sitting together here on this re-intro section. So you can hear it's a very nice, full, big sound coming from these 3 acoustic guitars. We've got the two 6 strings wide panned, and then that 12 string tucked right up underneath in the middle to fill out the spectrum, the stereo spectrum, as well as the frequency spectrum here. Now, tip number 1 for tackling triple tracked acoustic guitars is to do preemptive EQ strikes on each of the individual tracks here. So if we look at each of the individual guitars, so here's the 6 string on the left. We've got a high pass filter rolling off some of the extensive low end, and then we're pulling out some of the muddiness here in the low mids around 250, 300 here. If we look at the 6 string on the right, you can see we're doing the same kind of move here, rolling off the excess bottom end, because with mic'd acoustics, you're going to get some woofiness from the body sometimes, or woofiness coming from the hole. If there's not something in the hole, usually you don't want something in the hole though, while you're micing up an acoustic. If you're going DI with it, sometimes you'll put that feedback circle in there, feedback blocker. But you're going to get some woofiness coming off the body sometimes, and you'll get some air blasts going into the microphone. So rolling off the bottom end here on each of these guitars helps make sure we don't have buildup in the sub area. And then same thing here, pulling out some of the muddiness in the low mid area. And then again, on our 12 string here, rolling off the bottom end, so taking off that extra sub area, and then pulling out some of the excess sound, the excess buildup in the low mid area. So let me take off all these plugins here, and I'm just going to A/B these 3 EQs across our acoustics here, so you can hear without. You'll hear our raw acoustic guitar sound here, and then I'll put these 3 EQs in, and you can hear the difference that it makes, taking care of that sub area on each of these 3 acoustics, and then pulling out some of the low mid area. We already have miles better of a sound coming from this group of guitars just by pulling out some of the buildup in the low mid area, some of that muddiness, and then rolling off that excess sub area. You can hear that buildup coming from some of the woofiness of a mic'd acoustic guitar building up across 3 tracks here, just in that sub area. And we put that high pass in, and we have much cleaner of a sound coming from this group of guitars. Now, tip number 2 is to do a little bit of compression on each of the individual tracks so we have a more even signal to group together. So if we look at each of these individual tracks here, you can see I've put in an 1176 style compressor, and they all have the same settings with a little bit different input and output. So we're running 0.55 milliseconds attack, so medium slow for this unit, but still very, very quick in general, and then fastest release at 50 milliseconds, 4:1 ratio. We're going to be doing about 3 dB reduction on each of these tracks. Excuse me, so just grabbing, lunch coming back to give me here, just grabbing the bigger peaks on each of these guitars here. So each of these guitars has the same 1176, same settings, 4:1, attack and release, and then our 12 string as well here. Same attack and release, 4-to-1 ratio, just going for those peaks there. So I'm going to hit play here, and I'll cycle through, and you can see what we're getting from each of these compressors here. I'll A-B them first, and then I'll show you each of the settings. You can see the gain reduction we're getting out of them. Just 3 dB reduction on those peaks, pulling those bigger peaks down to even out the guitar sound. So as we group them together, they're not moving all over the place. They work as one cohesive unit, because that's what they're supposed to sound. It's supposed to sound like one huge guitar playing here, right? Not 3 separate guitars playing 3 different parts. Also, the compressor is giving us a more solid sound frequency-wise. If you hear one more time as I A-B the compressors, I'll start without them, and then when I kick it in, you can kind of hear how these 3 guitars kind of solidify a little bit more frequency-wise as well as volume-wise. So that's our second tip there. We're doing a little bit of EQ on each of the guitars. That's our first step. And then our second tip is doing a little bit of compression on each of the guitars, so they're primed and prepped individually to treat them together as a package. So now, tip number 3 is we're working on them as if they were one guitar. So here's our EQ. You can see here's our more extensive EQ, right? We're putting our high pass in, so doing a little bit of safety as a group here. You can see it's not so high. And then pulling out just a touch more of that low mid area. We don't need to pull out so much because we've already prepped them a little bit as a group here. Now we've got 3 boosts up on the top end here. This 8K boost, that's adding our top end air and that brightness you want to hear on a package or a group of acoustic guitars. That's that string shine that helps them feel all shimmery. This here in the mid-range here, the high mid, this 3K boost, we're doing about 4 dB at 3K. That's going to help these guitars cut through the mix a little bit better, especially because we've got a lot going on, a big stack of background vocals. We want to hear this mid-range on the acoustic guitar. Now this here is kind of helping fill out the track. You can see there's not any other guitars. It's this group of acoustic guitars, and that's it. There's no other instruments here in the rhythm section that are going to fill this out. So we need this extra bump of mid-range to help fill out the frequency spectrum. So take a listen without this EQ and then with it. You can hear all of that brightness and all of that shine that you want to hear from a group of acoustic guitars playing together like this. Now, I'm doing a little bit more compression, but as a group here. So there's a couple things to take into consideration. I'm using what is called butter compression. This is something I stole from Joe Gilder's videos back in the day. It's fast attack, fast release, so 5 millisecond attack, 20 millisecond release. The threshold is all the way down, and then we're bringing up the ratio to get consistent compression across this group here. Now what I've done, since it's a group, is I've turned off the stereo link, so it's not going to compress them all together. It's going to move and hit each of them individually. So it'll treat our left and right separately, so just because one peaks on the right side, it's not going to clamp down on both of them. It'll pull them down and kind of help them balance together, which is the nice thing about a stereo compressor that's not linked like this. So you can see we're only going to do about 3 dB reduction on the group, but it's going to be consistent and it's going to be very, very smooth. That's why it's called butter compression here. So take a listen without and then with. So to me, this style of compression, this butter compression, helps to concrete in the sound that you're going for. We've done all of our EQ work. We've done a little bit of compression that shapes our tone a little bit. This is just solidifying all the work we've done and concreting in these three acoustic guitars to feel like one unit here. So that's our compressor. Last thing we're doing here is just a bump of EQ in the bottom end. You can hear we thinned it out a touch in our first EQ, but that's because I don't want to push bottom end into the compressor. Now we can add bottom end afterwards because we're primed, everything's prepped, it's treated like a package. We've got it consistent, we've got it concreted in. Now we can add bottom end, we can add that warmth on the low end, and it's going to be consistent. It's not going to move all over the place and on different sides as well. So take a listen without and then with this final boost. Really fills out the frequency spectrum on our acoustic guitars and helps them feel bigger. So let's go over all three now. So we'll A/B all of the processing here across our acoustic guitars, and you can hear our before and our after. Three tips for mixing triple tracked acoustic guitars or any groups of acoustic guitars. Tip number one is doing a little bit of EQ on each, rolling off that bottom end, pulling out any buildup in the low mid. Tip number two is preemptive strikes with compression, just 3 dB reduction on some of those peaks to even them out individually so they work better as a group. And then tip number three is mixing them together as a package as if they were one acoustic guitar. So adding that brightness, adding that evenness and that cohesion, and adding that warmth in the bottom end. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist. You can download it below by clicking the link in the video description. Start getting more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you in the next video.